to Dallas, and welcome to 3D Experience World 2024. Jean-Paul Bassi!
This is the 25th anniversary of this event. We'll work together to imagine what the next 25 years will look like.
You are the most vibrant design community on the planet.
AI is a reality at SolidWorks. It's not a future concept. Future is now.
We're problem solvers. Technology advancement is what we do.
It's just a great place to network. It's a great place to learn about new technologies. Those are the types of things that really keep me coming back to 3DEXPERIENCE.
There's this strong community. It's fun to see people that you don't see except for here.
Our journey into the future of innovation continues. Today we present more trailblazing companies whose work demonstrates the transformative power of the technology.
5 years ago, we made the first sketch on SolidWorks. Life has come full circle as we introduce our first product to the world.
We are makers. We provide and touch lives worldwide.
Everyone here is super knowledgeable on what they're presenting, which is super nice, and I'm just absorbing as much information as possible.
We wanted to offer you the tools to imagine, simulate, and create the world you wanted to live in.
Welcome to What's New in SolidWorks 2024. This episode is your place to take in the best of what's new inside the SolidWorks 2024 release.
What can we do to make a big leap impact? I challenged each of our core teams with delivering at least one big bang kind of thing.
It's important to know that this doesn't interfere with any of the already existing productivity tools and enhancements like this context-sensitive toolbar, which allows me to, of course, set these lines equal to each other to make a square. That's a pretty incredible enhancement. It's something that we're all going to be able to use every day.
And to any seasoned SolidWorks user, they would know that creating this pattern in typical parametric software would take a lot of time. But here you can create it in just a couple clicks. All these things you can do in SolidWorks, but now you can do it much faster with our additional cloud capabilities.
Joking aside, we really are excited about all these very cool features that are part of cloud services. And I would say first and foremost, we're excited to introduce this idea of being able to share your designs with anyone, right from within inside of SolidWorks.
Now, this was assembled with tab and slot features, but you see when I assemble that new instance, I don't have the slots already cut out. So what's new in sheet metal for 2024 is this new propagate slots option. When you revision something, well, what about the title block? So the title block and the revision block, well, that automatically gets populated because that data is just carried along automatically.
You'll find that in 2024, this is enhanced even more so. First of all, the performance is very snappy, so you'll find that very quick. You can very easily make cool solar sweep or take a look at your product throughout in a certain spot throughout the year or anything like that with just a handful of clicks. So really cool system. I had a ton of fun building, probably more fun than I should be allowed to have at work, building the rendering images for this year's project, and it's been the most effortless version of the software to use so far.
I see someone just said SW SolidWorks desktop rules. There we go. Brilliant design. Thank you very much. So all of you in the live chat, welcome. All of you watching from home or the office, welcome to SolidWorks Live. So here on the heels of 3D Experience World 2024, where thousands gathered and over 10,000 tuned in via live online across 3 days of the annual conference event, 3D Experience World 2024, we learned of several new product announcements that are intended to help you make better products. And during the second part of what's new here in 2024 series, joined here by my co-host for the beginning of this portion, Noah Z. We're going to cover all the bases, the net new announcements for SolidWorks users, and then in sequence move into 8-minute segments with 3 additional subject-specific product experts that I caught up with recently. And the collective plan being, we're going to show you how we're planning on serving SolidWorks users in new, groundbreakingly accessible ways across manufacturing, product management, and simulation, just like you saw in that very order. So let's get started. Let's bring Noah back on, our first guest, our design apps expert, Noah Zeef. Noah, what's going on, man?
Hey, Sean. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to have you. So, Noah, I just mentioned this episode is about what's new with 3D Experience Works, which you're well acclimated with. I see the X-Gen design ball in the background. You can see you're so very proud of that.
Yeah, I can't get rid of it.
You can't get rid of it. Well, we know it bounces. It doesn't. This version does not break apart. We saw that on the latest episode of Live Design. If you didn't catch that, go back on the SolidWorks YouTube and look up Designing Crazy Patterns. And you'll see a 20-minute refreshed live design format starring Noah as our first guest. But, once again, Noah, it's what's new today is what's new with 3D Experience Works in 2024. And, I want to start off a little bit with something that isn't new. And what that is, like most cloud solutions that we use in our personal and professional lives, each 3D Experience Works app, whether it's X Generative Design, X Design, one of our simulation apps, they all, update quietly in the background, and they bring you new features, new functionality throughout the year. But now, as we heard several times at World, we're now doing that new type of new feature release scheduling with SolidWorks, which, we have some fans here in the chat. SolidWorks, the CAD program, that is, right?
That's exactly right, Sean. So similar to how our cloud products are updated several times throughout the year, service packs, which are periodically released for SolidWorks every few months, will contain new features and new capabilities. So it'll be a similar release methodology to 3D Experience Works and our other cloud solutions. And this is already actively happening in 2024. So if you were at 3D Experience World in Dallas this year, you saw some of those new features already. Be sure to check your What's New documentation throughout the year. And of course, subscribe to our channel so you can see those running updates as they're released.
Yeah, and what we're seeing now, just for context, these are some features. If you tuned into 3D Experience World 2024, you might have saw some previews via Don't Miss This Demo. So we saw linear patterning of planes. That was one of the features that was previewed coming soon in a new release. What we're seeing here, just for some context, we're seeing some highlighting of dangling dimensions and an auto repair tool similar to the auto repair tool that we introduced for Mates just a couple of major releases ago. And then we're seeing, some switching of display states, a very common SolidWorks operations. But what is new in terms of display states is, as we see, we're highlighting a bill of materials. Traditionally, we could change what is viewed in terms of the configurations. But what we can now do is we can now customize the view of the bill of materials within SolidWorks in the drawing, for example, via display states. So it's very, very interesting. So these are some examples, of course, of some of the new features that we have sort of in the pipeline for future releases. But like you said, Noah, every year, still we're going to release a large number of new features during that first service pack, that SP0, that first new major release. But now in service packs, just like, again, other cloud software that we use in our personal and professional lives, SolidWorks on the desktop side is going to be featuring various net new features, net new enhancements in the software. And I think that's very exciting. So all the more reason, as many of our customers, most of our customers are on subscription, keep updating, keep upgrading, and look out in your What's New documents. And as you mentioned, Noah, keep up on the SolidWorks YouTube channel to keep up with those enhancements. But now I want to get to another aspect of why I had you on today. So here on the live show,
Once again, we stream content across 3 days of 3D Experience World. And I mentioned at the top, we had our highest number ever of viewers tune in to watch the kickoff of the World Conference, which you can go back today or tomorrow, anytime to go back and watch. But, still, you think about it, that's a lot of content. That's 3 days of, a conference where there's thousands of people, all these presentations, all these announcements. There were a lot of product announcements, right? And as part of this What's New in 3D Experience Works episode of SolidWorks Live here for 2024, I want to take the time with you to go through what we might consider the top 5 new product announcements that you may have missed. And no, I'm going to challenge you, try to keep it to about 60 seconds per product announcement. Does that sound good?
Let's do it. Start the clock.
All right, let's do it. Let's go.
All right. So the first announcement was a bit of a sneak peek into a really exciting solution we're putting a ton of effort into for SolidWorks users. The mechatronics device industry is growing rapidly. It's something we've been saying for years now, and it remains true. And with our new cloud solution, 3D Cyber Mechatronics Creator, our aim is to allow SolidWorks users to easily blend mechanical CAD, electronics, controls, and software system design directly on the platform. And the ultimate goal here is to tie in these separate skill domains while accommodating to both beginner and advanced level users in a simple and collaborative environment. So in this brief demo, you're seeing some of the promise of the capabilities coming with this product. It provides a unifying AI-powered toolset that can automate several aspects of system design, programming, and virtual testing. And users can also leverage a variety of library components with pre-programmed behaviors. So they'll have access to servo motors, PCB boards, power sources, and more that will give them a feel in the virtual environment of how they'll act in real life. The next one comes via a huge partnership we announced with Cadence. And this is going to allow Cadence to bring its electronic design power within its OrCAD X offering to SolidWorks users. And this will further connect ECAD and MCAD workflows. So this is going to streamline intelligent printed circuit board design with solid-graded integrated tools. And that'll be true for both desktop or cloud solutions, like I did in this controller example. So the basic idea is within a tool like SolidWorks or an X app like Xshape, we can design enclosures as well as the intended real estate for the overall board. And this is something any MCAD or product design tool can do fairly well. Where OrCAD comes in is within the definition of the board itself. So we can plan the actual design of the circuits and reduce overall design turnaround time in the process. And the best part is through CircuitWorks and the 3D Experience platform, updates are bi-directionally synced. So this will minimize the chance of miscommunication, overwrites, and other challenges that are common in ECAD and MCAD workflows. Now, of course, SolidWorks isn't new to the ECAD space. SolidWorks Electrical has empowered MCAD and ECAD engineers for years. It's allowed teams to synchronize their workflows, diagram schematics, route layouts, and more through a desktop program that speaks directly to the mechanical side of SolidWorks. Relatedly, CircuitWorks, which is what you see here, is another electrical domain solution from SolidWorks. So this is a SolidWorks integrated product that allows you to generate 3D models representing the shape of PCB layouts for insertion into your SolidWorks assemblies. And that was previously done by importing ECAD files in popular formats like IDF and others. And historically, this has only been part of SolidWorks Professional and Premium, but beginning with SPO2 of this year, CircuitWorks will be available to all SolidWorks customers on subscription. The next announcement is about DraftSight, which we know is a 2D package that has been growing insanely quickly over the past few years, both at individual and enterprise levels. It's been a proven long-term solution in 2D drafting for the architectural industry, construction, manufacturing, and more. And historically, it's pretty much existed solely as a desktop installed software, meaning you had to be at your computer to open, modify, or create any DXFs and DWGs. And that's no longer the case with our new version called DraftSight Creator. And this will provide powerful 2D drafting capabilities on browser-based devices. It'll store design data securely on the cloud, and it will enable tools for cross-team collaboration. So anyone on your team can check out the newest drawing and give feedback instantly. And for this last one, Sean, we have a bunch of new value offer solutions that exists across a few different topics: product management, simulation, and manufacturing. And for those, I think I should leave those to the domain experts. So I'll let the rest of the guests on the show here today dive deeply into those exciting new features.
There we go. Okay, so I clocked you. 4 minutes, 30 seconds.
All right.
There you go.
We did it.
Nice round. Yeah, you didn't even take up the full 5 minutes that you could have. So +1 in the chat. I just want to give a few shout outs. You know, we are live here. Dan, Ronit, Praveen, Todd, Theodore, Steve, Machendo, many others. Joe Lance, great to see you. So thank you guys all for tuning in. And Noah, thank you for letting us know. Like, again, it was a jam-packed event. We saw at the very beginning during the countdown before we even officially launched this show that we will be back in Houston next February for 3D Experience World 2025. But it's always a great time, always a ton going on. So thank you so much for distilling that for us. And thank you so much for designing amazing things like that basketball in the background.
Awesome. Thanks,
yeah,
Sean.
man.
Excited to see everyone next year in Houston.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back on live before then. But once again, man, thank you very much.
Thanks.
You know, I'm thinking back to 3D Experience World and feeling a little nostalgia. You know, another rich memory that I have from being in Dallas with thousands of you at 3D Experience World last month was the shop floor exhibit, right? All these amazing machines, cutting edge capabilities. But, you know, when I think about the shop floor, once again, anyone really, any of you, I'm sure the first thing you think of are CNC machines. Like, how couldn't you? They're some of the coolest parts of any shop floor. But interestingly enough, when I think about our next guest, you know, when it comes to what's new in 3D Experience Works within manufacturing, which is the next kind of area, next domain of what's new we're going to be covering here in 2024, my manufacturing-centric colleague, Chris McBain, seemed to say that, you know, that act of cutting parts is really just the start of what we're to look forward to here in 2024. And that might be a little bit perplexing, but let's hear why over the next 8 minutes or so coming up now. All right, everyone, we are joined here by Chris McBain. Chris, welcome to SolidWorks Live.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back, man. This is one of my favorite things to do. I'm telling you, I love it.
That warms my heart, man. I love to hear it. But we're covering today what's new in 3D Experience Works in 2024. And, you know, Chris, when we launched SolidWorks 2024 with our feature customer, Bowhead Corp, our worldwide community of over, 7.5 million users, we heard Suchit say that over during 3D Experience World, they might have seen some awesome design work on display, of course, when we were covering SolidWorks 2024 with the first part of this What's New series. And surely they saw, you know, how their engineering team collaborated with one another using cloud services, which we'll talk more about a little bit later, of course. But, you know, one thing that they might not have seen, which is really, I think, the primary area where you spent a lot of time within our worldwide launch with Bowhead, was the embedded interplay with manufacturing operations. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, you know, what an amazing project, by the way. You know, I met some of the Bowhead people at World this year, and it was just, I mean, first of all, great bunch of people, and what an interesting story. And the manufacturing part, to me, really spoke to the advantages of 3D Experience Works platform and manufacturing, right? One of the examples that Bowhead was talking to us about were, you know, they were designing kind of that back suspension for their bike. And there was just the first design they sent out for manufacturing, and the manufacturer said, you know what, if we change the design just a little bit, we can save you a lot of time and a lot of money. Now with 3D Experience Platform, they're able to communicate throughout the company, you know, hey, here are our options. You know, here are a couple of different designs we came up with. They shared that with the person that was manufacturing the part, and they came up with a really great solution in the end that was cheaper to make and just as durable. I mean, it was really cool. So, you know, we're talking about, you know, the use of the manufacturability checker that comes with, you know, every seated Delmia, everything, right? And markup and review, which is just a platform given. And that really, again, you know, this story is really about the power of the platform, Sean, for sure.
And speaking of, I mentioned cloud services, which was a total game changer. You know, when it came to just announcements that we had last year at World, gave, just in recap, it gave each new seat of SOLIDWORKS ready-made capabilities to share, markup, store, revise, manage, and control their SOLIDWORKS data, their engineering data, which of course is crucial to, right, inevitably making actual physical parts. It sounds like a given, but as SOLIDWORKS users now having that ready-made space to operate that way, it's fantastic. But of course, as we've said, right, you have to get the parts made. And just like we did with cloud services last year, we're aiming to make it easier than ever for companies to embrace this level of organization and efficiency now, heading into 2024, to inevitably create their parts, correct, on the manufacturing end?
Absolutely. Really absolutely. And, believe it or not, everybody out there, Sean and I actually talk besides this show. We are talking about this question a little bit. And, I was really talking, the thing that really hit me here was, the space to operate, like a ready-made space, right? And, thinking about that, getting people into that space, and that space being the platform, right? Where you can design, you can manufacture, you can organize, you can do all of these things that we're talking about today inside of the platform, right? And the key is when you purchase something, we're so used to saying, popping in and out, like you say, like, we'll go into SolidWorks and then go into our CAM, or go into SolidWorks and then go into another thing to do, say, some other part of our job. Having that all in one space is really important. And what we've done and what we realize with Delmia is, we have a few different offerings in Delmia, and one of which is CAM, as a big one. And getting people into this space, into the platform, is really important, not to really show them the power of our CAM offering as much as showing them the power of the platform. We can cut your parts, right? And in order to show you this, we've come up with some really great offers, right? And they're bundles. And in these bundles, you're going to see there's actually 4 of them, right? So from 3-axis all the way up to multi-axis milling and turning, they're really competitive. If anybody's interested in trying these, let's talk to your reseller, give us a call, and we'd be more than happy to go over this and talk about which one of these is going to be right for you, right? Because that's really what these packages are about, is getting the right fit for you and not shoving a whole bunch of stuff at you that you're not going to use. So yes, it's all about right fitting, Sean, for sure.
Yeah, it's a fantastic way of putting it. I think that kind of resonates within just overall the sort of incorporations that we made into our portfolio over the years, right? There's so much that we've seen. I'm sure you've seen on social media, everyone watching here, YouTube, different industry conferences, in terms of what quote unquote 3D experience can do. But that's really what we're trying to do within the Works portfolio, right? Just try to bundle in a way that's simple and also effective to what you're doing, different types of capabilities. And that's really core within the SolidWorks DNA. Over the years, that's something we've tried to do. And now this goes back many years ago now, say even with a package like SolidWorks CAM, that's a package that we made available at a few levels many years ago. And, as part of this overall conversation, as we're talking about Delmia, I sort of have to ask at this point, what are the benefits of the solutions you've mentioned within Delmia versus something like a SolidWorks CAM, for instance?
That's a great question, Sean. And, first, let me say that, both CAM systems are going to make your parts, period, right? They're both super capable CAM systems, especially when it comes to prismatic parts. And SolidWorks CAM, it's fine. Like, everything's going to cut your parts, right? One's not better than the other, right? They just have different applications, right? So if you're just machining, let's say, single products at a time, and you really don't have a heavy data load for manufacturing, you manufacture maybe a prototype, you get it out the door, and then maybe you let somebody else worry about the production. So that's not a big data load, right? If you're keeping track of multiple parts and, multiple production lines or something like that, now you've got this heavy data load, right? So, when your production really starts to grow, right, and there's more of a need for, let's say, organization, accessibility, and really the reuse of that manufacturing data, that's where Delmia is definitely a must-have, right? And everything from like a virtual twin, of complete manufacturing cells, right? To the creation of manufacturing bill of materials or MBOMs, to order tracking. I mean, Delmia can do all of that. Again, it's not that it's a better product than SolidWorks can, or vice versa, right? I mean, they're both really, really capable. But with Delmia, you get this really great solution of, data management that a lot of shops are really needing these days. And like you said, Sean, just to close this out really quickly, it is the evolution of SolidWorks, right? We are evolving to give our users more. When it was just design, it was great. And then we realized, hey, more people are doing in-house manufacturing. Let's offer SolidWorks CAM, right? We didn't take anything away, we added it. And that's what we're doing here. We're adding more options for our users.
Awesome. Well, Chris, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on this episode, What's New in 3D Experience Works 2024. Talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, Sean. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thanks again to Chris McBain, again, our resident manufacturing expert here on the technical marketing side, for jumping on with us on SolidWorks Live. So as we talked about with Chris, in July of last year, in 2023, we at SolidWorks, we made what I would consider one of the biggest investments into new licenses of SolidWorks in many, many years, right? Cloud services for SolidWorks. We added that to each new seat of SolidWorks sold. And you might be wondering, that's July of 2023, it's March of 2024. For example, like how many eligible users activated it to take advantage of its easy design sharing, the markup capabilities, storage, revision, change management. And, what are some other ways here now, fast forwarding to 2024 and even beyond it, that we're looking to help SolidWorks users overcome product development challenges going beyond even what SolidWorks cloud services for SolidWorks can do. So let's see what's coming over the next 8 minutes via my conversation with our next subject matter expert, Steve Fick. Steve, welcome to SolidWorks Live.
Thanks, Sean. It's good to be back once again.
Absolutely, man. It's always great to have you. A huge announcement that we made during the first part of our What's New in 2024 two-parter, which you were a part of. Was entirely dedicated, and you can go back and watch it on YouTube right now. It's entirely dedicated to the launch of SolidWorks 2024, was the inclusion of cloud services inside of each new seat of SolidWorks. And Steve, again, you were on that episode. It's been a few months now. Could you, for people who were not able to watch that episode, could you first just give us a brief look back at what cloud services is, how teams like Bowhead Corp, our feature customer for the 2024 release, have leveraged it, and also maybe again with some distance now. It came out right in July. July was a big launch of cloud services with some distance, maybe even some analytical insights into how we've seen our customers leveraging it, mere months since its release.
Yeah, that's right. So cloud services was really about giving our customers a tool set of just common abilities to make design easier, is kind of how we saw it. And we broke it up into three areas. One was share and markup, store and revise, and manage and control. And the idea is that you don't necessarily need to use all of these things. Like you can literally start with share and markup. And this idea was that it's our own modern take on collaboration with people. So right within inside of SolidWorks, I can hit share a file. It prompts me to provide an email address of whoever I want to share it with. That ensures it's nice and secure. And they get notified with a link and then have the ability to open it right in a web browser. And the key thing is there's no viewers to install, right? So I can just open the browser, start adding some markups, comments. And the beautiful thing about it is that whatever gets added shows up right inside the task pane inside of SolidWorks. So I can see it. And it's not just images. They're actually the marked up 3D model. I can rotate and see right in the task pane of SolidWorks. So it's a real nice, simple way to get started with cloud services. Many customers are like, we really actually want to get ourselves into doing more collaboration with our designs, because not everybody's in the same office, or even if they are, we have a we have a tendency to want to overwrite each other's files, or we want to be able to, we start having cases where we're appending the file name with the revision. And with these capabilities, much of that, if not all of it, goes away. So you've got built-in revision management. You've got the ability to simply update the status of a file through its maturity. And it's just a nice seamless way of being able to, better manage your data. And then there's kind of this third piece of it, which is manage and control. And this really starts to expose customers to more, let's say, PDM, PLM-esque functions. So being able to capture issues on your designs and have a controlled way of managing those, and as well as change actions. And you may also find that you're in a situation where you want to have a more controlled process for releasing your designs. So it's this, like you said, a really big announcement for us. It was met with a lot of excitement. In fact, through the end of the year, basically we announced it in July, ran it, it's at the end of the year, we ended up with roughly 75% of our new customers activating this capability. So it was met with, as I shared, a lot of excitement, and it's something that we're really quite proud of.
Yeah, I was going to say 75%. I'm not even sure if I were to think of like one of the most popular add-ins, even like SolidWorks Toolbox, 75% in its first year. That's pretty crazy when you think about it in the sort of broader context of what we've done.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And like you said, all that capability, it's available for use in each new seat. That's awesome. It's phenomenal. But with that said, and this just comes out of working with customers over the years. There are other aspects of running a product or an engineering company that our customers also need help with, right? You think about all the areas that we discussed, but there are more, right? So it might not always be the same per company, though. For example, and I find this kind of comes up, with companies of maybe greater scale. Think like 5+ SolidWorks users or so. Like there might be a desire, a need, or maybe even a mandate, right, to project plan a bit more carefully, or maybe bill of materials management. Maybe that's more of a concern, or like managing changes, ERP integration. So. Steve, how are we planning to provide these business and product management solutions for our users in new ways during 2024, given those challenges?
Yeah, I think you make a really great point. I mean, at the end of the day, we tend to think a lot about the SolidWorks user, but as you kind of expand beyond that, there's a whole team involved in typically bringing products to market inside of a company. And as one of my colleagues, Mike Sandy, likes to say, these tools are designed to basically bookend that designed, right? So as we grow out from there, there's additional capabilities, and these roles are more designed to build on top of the cloud services that we just talked about. So if you think about it, before a design, you often have product managers or sales engineers who need to concept the design before the engineer even starts, or before the purchase order even shows up for that design. It's kind of like, we need to take that piece of the design and we need to kind of put it together, and it needs to look like this, and I need to be able to sell that idea before you actually start to engineer it. It's just this ability to do that inside of a browser without having to have a CAD system involved, without taking up an engineer's time. And as you mentioned, at that point, then you've also got project management and new milestones that need to be hit. And so being able to do that in the exact same environment as well, this web-based environment, those can seamlessly be handed off to SolidWorks users now. So where that traditionally all would have been done inside of like an Excel document, now whatever's created by those product managers, sales engineers, just seamlessly opens inside of SolidWorks, and they can start to build out the rest of the design. If we look at the tail end of things, then once we're trying to get the design released, you've got a lot of activities that need to go on with the BOM. And oftentimes it needs to have custom properties finalized, and it needs to have, it needs to be filtered to specific views in order to be handed off to others. Again, that all would have been done typically inside of Excel. And now the same product definition from start to finish can all be leveraged by the organization, which is really quite phenomenal. And then, the other thing that we're excited about is, you'll see a little later this year, is the fact that full change management across multiple domains. So, oftentimes a design isn't just a design challenge or issue that comes up isn't just mechanical. It may actually have an electrical component, may have, other domains involved that all have to be coordinated in order to get the actual fix done. And so these apps are going to provide really robust capabilities to coordinate and facilitate change across multiple domains. So a lot of good stuff coming in the coming months.
Awesome. We'll see if I can say probably throughout the rest of this year, this probably will not be your last time on SolidWorks Live, given all these exciting solutions that we're offering here. So, but once again, as always, thank you so much for jumping on the show.
Hey, no problem. Thank you, Sean.
It's interesting, as I listen back to that conversation I just recently had with Steve, and also the conversation that we had with Chris on the manufacturing side. I think one of the keys to this episode, and I think you guys would agree, has been simplification. Namely, just making it easier to get the capabilities that you've told us you need to create better products more efficiently. And, there might be no better area that could benefit more from this sort of approach than simulation. Because when you consider what SolidWorks users now have access to, with Abacus solvers and the potential of cloud computing that we hear so much about, the possibilities, they can feel sort of endless in ways that are often good, but can be bad if you don't know exactly what you want, and it's hard to kind of sift through the noise. So let's see what's new for SolidWorks users in 2024 and how we are simplifying access to game-changing simulation capabilities over the next 8 minutes with my colleague, Ronit Mukherjee. Ronit, welcome to SolidWorks Live. How's it going, man?
Hey man, it's going fantastic. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure when I join these things with you. It's always fun.
Absolutely, you're like a SolidWorks Live veteran at this point. You've been on.
Hey, all thanks to you, man. All thanks to you. You showed me the way.
Yeah, man. So we've mentioned multiple times in this episode so far, this edition of SolidWorks Live, it's entirely dedicated to what's new in 3DEXPERIENCE Works in 2024, and for our SolidWorks users out there, which I would guess, with this streaming on SolidWorks LinkedIn and streaming on the SolidWorks YouTube channel, it's probably a lot of you. I wanted to ask you, as a member of our tech team who's seen the evolution on the adoption side of this massive breadth of simulation capabilities within 3DEXPERIENCE, what have the past 1 to 2 years been like for you? As I would say, maybe 3 things, like an observer. One thing I think is important to mention as a product designer, a former product designer, in yourself, and also a member of our team. What have they been like, I think with how we've worked with Bowhead and other customers?
Oh, man, fantastic question. Very loaded question, but the good one. So, Bowhead is a fantastic product. If all of us saw those videos of, their bike just barreling down these off-roading paths, that's a fun product. And it's also a very complicated product. So, talking to the Bowhead engineers and, seeing what they have done and how we can improve their designs. And they've done a fantastic job. But of course, when you have simulation tools in your hand, you're able to create even better products, So, and the goal for simulation, Sean, is not to run these simulations, once the Bowhead model is done, it's in the, the assembly stage, or you're doing the finishing touch up to the CAD models. We want to be able to give the simulation tool directly to the design engineer so they can start running simulations at a very, very early stage. I want them to be able to run basic structural simulation, as well as you're making these swing arms or the handlebars, to make sure as we are going down and when this product comes together, there's less number of iterations that you need to make to these components. So we started from scratch. We started from the base level, Sean. So we were able to kind of I used a base simulation, cloud simulation tool. I think it was the structural engineer. and I was able to understand how much forces and pressures were acting on this swing arm, and whether it'd be able to withstand things down the road, let's say impact and things like that. So starting from the base, and then we took it a step forward. I wanted to understand what now the structural part of it looks good, but what happens to it when you're putting this e-bike or this cycle through multiple different scenarios, or you're putting it through multiple different cycles, and what that does to the components, or from a fatigue point of view. So when you have forces that are acting upon your components non-stop over the time, they do create these micro cracks, and you want to be able to understand what these cracks can do, and how fatigue can actually grow and cause failure in your products. So you want to be able to understand these before you design the product. So with our high level simulation capabilities, we have the ability to run fatigue analysis, crash tests, or random vibrations. So a lot of these structural complicated structural simulations that you do need to have, or you require to be able to get a good product out there, and not have warranty claims down the road, or have catastrophic crashes out on the road. So you want to be able to understand how your product behaves when it comes together and over time. So quite a lot of capabilities, man, and things just keep adding. So I'd love to get in details with with you at some point in one of these live episodes. We'll just pick one and just keep going at it.
Yeah, and in fact, like you said, you can always do a super deep dive into any domain of simulation. I think for our viewers today on the SolidWorks YouTube channel especially, you can even go back on the live tab, and we have an episode which I believe was entitled Mastering Simulation, which is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, right? How do you master simulation in the midst of 45 to 50 minutes? But it was sort of a deep dive overview of sorts. And, we mentioned Bowhead. It's great that we have tools that allow Christian Bagg, the CTO of Bowhead, to not always be the sort of crash test dummy in the sort of product testing experiments that they do. Having virtual testing is great for that reason, and many others, as our customers have found out. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Ronit, when it comes to, as you mentioned, this super wide-ranging simulation toolkit, especially one that is provably useful and investment-worthy for SolidWorks customers, as we've already covered, the common fears, the common objections that we tend to hear, right, surround things like not knowing what you need, or on the other end, not knowing what you don't need, not buying things that you don't need and you won't use and are not relevant to developing better products. And all that is surrounded by the factor of, I would say, cost, right? We all know in our personal and professional lives as consumers, as leveragers of different solutions, that cost is a key component in any decision. But how are we aiming? I want to ask you, as a simulation expert, how are we aiming to solve these sorts of concerns, these sort of problems in the marketplace this year with our simulation solutions in 2024?
No, that's a great question, Sean. And, we'll start with the solutions that we have in 2024 for simulation, and also why we did something, why we bundled it in a way that we did. And, to be honest, the goal is to get simulation in everyone's hand. You don't want to be running these simulations, like I mentioned, down the road when you have your final CAD ready. So you want to be able to do it as you are designing the product. So the best way to do that, Sean, here, what we have done is we've bundled it in 4 different ways, where we're addressing, the first one is addressing your simulation design engineer that might want to run some structural analysis, some linear analysis, or frequency or buckling at a very a basic level to understand if these components are going to work down the road or not. So that would be your first tier. So, you have your design engineers working with this, and it's a fairly easy software to learn, to be honest. It's got good user interface, and it's very intuitive as you sort of click around with it. Then, Sean, your next year would be simulation engineer, where let's say you need to get a little bit more capabilities in with your simulation tool. So, for example, you might want to run some nonlinear analysis, some linear dynamic stuff, so you were able to use that second tier product or bundle to be able to, run some of these a little bit more complicated analysis. And then you have your analyst role, which is which of course is the next tier. And the way we've bundled it in a way is the analysis of a person who might require to run some complicated simulations, such as fatigue analysis, or some crash testing, or implicit explicit dynamic analysis. So for that person, you do require some high-end simulation capabilities, and that's what we have provided with the third tier. And the last, the enterprise here, we're calling it multi-physics at the moment. What we have done with this, we provided so all the capabilities that are that we've already talked about, so all the structural capabilities, but we've also provided the fluid dynamics capabilities from our FMK role. So that kind of adds a whole different suite of simulation capabilities there. And not only that, Sean, in that final tier you have some complicated simulation that we can run, which can involve let's say fluid and structural coupling and things like that. So you can have two tools talk to each other. So yeah, so 4 different offers or bundles, let's call it, that we produced or that we put out there for 2024. And Sean, I'm going to be very honest, these the way we have bundled it's extremely competitive.
Awesome. Well, Rana, as always, once again, you've been on live several times now. Thank you so much for being our resident simulation expert, and we hope to see you soon.
Hey man, thank you for the invite, and yeah, keep inviting me. I love this. I love talking to our audience and answering some questions. So thanks, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you to everyone who helped with today's production, and thank you to all of you, of course, for tuning in. And remember, the best place to reach out about any of the solutions that you saw today is your value-added reseller. They are there to have those conversations with you. They know your business best. And again, on that topic of what you need, what you don't need, all those sorts of discussions in an intelligent fashion cater to you, I think that's the best place to have that. And if you're looking to see any of the full-length videos of any of the content that you saw today, you can head on out to solidworks.com/what's new. And that's also the place for all of the SolidWorks 2024 content. So you can get all of the 3D Experience Works content, kind of how you extend your SolidWorks usage capabilities and all these exciting ways to create better products, as well as pure design with SolidWorks What's New in 2024. So once again, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you soon.